Welcome to Synchronicity. I don't know how this week's going to be. It could be terrible. I just wrote all this stuff down. I think it's going to be pretty good. What's going on with you guys? It's March. It's almost spring. Spring is the 20th. Is that the first day of spring? March 20th? March usually is like a bunch of like cock teasing you of what spring is going to be like, but I'm going to enjoy it. It was a really nice day today. It was like 50 degrees. Can't complain about that. How else are things in your life? How's imagining going? How's your world being transformed or not being transformed? And just to be clear, when you imagine stuff or you're trying to live the dream or whatever you want to call it, whatever ridiculously stupid name you want to call it, then I just used sometimes it doesn't feel like it's working. That's okay. That's a little test. That's what we call Threshold Guardian. The joy is in overcoming that and realizing that you have the ability to do that. So if you're in the point right now where it's not like going super smoothly, that's okay. What I feel like that right now is I'm getting my studio set up. Just got a new mixer, got a synth, got a drum machine, got a pedal, and hooking this shit up is kind of a nightmare. It's just like, this isn't working, and then that needs to be done there, but I'm getting there. And that's what gets me through the moments where I want to smash everything. So if you're in one of those smash everything moments, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. You got to trust and believe that. No matter what it is, it could be something that's seemingly more serious than setting up a studio, but hang in there. You're good. Before we get to the episode, I want to talk about the guys at Ned. They are awesome. Someone on Instagram hit me up this week and was like, hey, they sent me a bunch of extra stuff. I ordered the CBD, and I was like, yeah, they're just cool fucking guys. They actually really are cool guys. You can listen to the episode I did with them. Rhett and Adrian are the founders. It's from a couple of years ago. Go get their full spectrum CBD hemp oil. I like their chapstick. It's not as cold as it was. They have the magnesium now. They have all this shit. Truthfully, the only one I use right now is the chapstick and the CBD stuff once in a while. But they're fucking great. If you want to get a discount, use the code SYNC, SYNC at checkout. How about I tell you the fucking website? Would that be helpful? I think so. HelloNed.com. That's easy. Sync, SYNC at checkout. You get 15% off your entire order. They're great. They've supported this show now for, I think, over 2 years, and I love them, and they're cool. Get their shit. All right, on to the episode. I was listening to this dude, Earl Nightingale. He was a New Thought guy. Denise told me about him because he has a really cool voice. By the way, there's going to be a live festival March 24th. I'll post it again, that I'm doing with Bill. We're doing like an ambient live cool session thing, and we're going to use this Earl Nightingale part. That's what made me think of it. Check that out. I'll post info about that. That's fun. Earl Nightingale has a fucking cool noise. Jesus Christ, no. Has a cool voice, and he's a New Thought guy. So a lot of the things he says, oh my God, it sounds a lot like the New Thought stuff. If you don't know what New Thought is, it's a movement that started, we'll say 1900s, like it got very prominent in like motivational speaking in like the 40s and 50s and 30s. Neville Goddard's time. New Thought came out of the Theosophical Society, which was run by Madame Blavatsky, and I forget the dude's name. And they just, it was a bunch of like spiritual stuff, a bunch of woo shit, basically the equivalent of like the woo podcasts you might listen to now, but it was like an organized society. And then these ideas started funneling through, one of which you may be aware of is that imagination or consciousness or awareness precedes external reality. It is the generative cause. The causality there is consciousness, then external reality. So a lot of people were talking about this. Another one is Napoleon Hill. He wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, and he worked with Carnegie's and basically, wrote this whole kind of thing, like how to use your mind to like bring money, because a lot of people were focused on security and wealth and money back then, as they are now. Not so different, except now there's cryptocurrency and other weird shit. But a lot of this stuff is rooted in this idea that consciousness precedes external reality, and more importantly, that can be a testable hypothesis. It's not just something a lunatic says to you on the street or on a podcast. You can actually test this stuff out. So this guy, Earl Nightingale, has some cool stuff. I put a couple of his videos on MindPod Network, but you can go check him out. He's pretty widely available on the internet, and some good stuff. More like practical and logical kind of like nuts and bolts stuff. So if Neville Goddard and myself included can get a little fucking out there, we're talking about being dead and traveling to different places and dream worlds and things like that. It might not be your vibe right now, probably is if you're listening to this. But if it's not, this guy has like a very practical kind of focus on what to do. And a lot of it has to do with setting goals, being very clear about what you want when you're doing this type of stuff. I think a lot of people, that was certainly my biggest kind of hurdle or obstacle to overcome until I realized I was doing it, is I wasn't being very clear about what I wanted in life and situations, even in relationships. Like I wasn't clear. Like I had a big inclination, I could intuit kind of what's going on, but like wasn't specifically clear and focused on a specific scene or scenario or feeling, most importantly. That was a big turning point for me. So what he's really recommending, and a lot of people recommend, I'll recommend it too, be clear about what your desire is. Be clear about what your wish is. Have some semblance of an idea of where you're directing your consciousness, your imagination, your awareness towards, because then you're going to at least be able to gauge the efficacy or the success rate of what you're doing. So that's an important thing that I think I'm going to re-emphasize a little bit. Just be clear about what your goals are. Doesn't have to be like incredibly specific. Like you don't have to drill down to the last detail, but I'm trying to be very clear about what you want and be honest with yourself too. That's another thing. Like people sometimes shy away from things that they might want because it seems silly, or maybe it doesn't make sense, or it's not possible, or it's not practical. I highly recommend to completely disregard that. Obviously, don't get so disconnected from your relationship with external reality that you're not doing what you're supposed to do, but like don't necessarily be limited by what objectively appears to be true. Also, when you're scaling up to big, huge kind of like, large goals, be cool about it. Like don't try to go from 1 to 100 if you don't have experience doing that, like leveling up. You're going to find yourself in unfamiliar territory, and your reality may reflect back doubts, fears, anxieties, and all these other things to you objectively, and you just need to be prepared to deal with that. So I do recommend kind of like a gradual approach until you're comfortable enough with, then you can really start like bending reality, jumping timelines, whatever you want to call it. Another thing, when you're trying to get something or manifest something or imagine something, like you're trying to do it, what you're actually doing is you're implying that you don't have it right now. This is like a key kind of like, don't look directly at it type thing. The more you feel like you need to get something in life, whatever it is, it feels like you're being like, this is a real key distinction between having a goal, accepting it, surrendering to it, the desire, and kind of keeping it at a distance, what I would call habitually constructing, never dwelling in the state, right? So just be clear, when you feel like you really want something, you may be feeling like you don't have it. That's what you're going to keep giving yourself until you get to the point where you're like, oh no, this is for me. This has happened. This is happening. That is a completely different way of engaging with things than being like, oh, I really need this. I notice this a lot with money. It's the weirdest fucking thing. If I start feeling like, well, I need more for this, or I want this to be more, or if I get this much, then I'll get that, I'm actually keeping it at a distance. Whereas when I'm just like, fuck it, I think I pretty much have enough no matter what. It's always been my experience that I do no matter what, even if it's like some magical thing that comes in and has to like, it happens. I was just saying today that every single time I'm kind of like cagey about spending on something, doesn't feel great, and I have like money starts to kind of go down a little bit. Every time I spend, even if I feel like maybe I don't actually think I have it right now, but I just do it and I trust it, more money comes in. It's really weird. I'm not saying that's how it is for everyone, but in my experience, there does seem to be a direct connection there. That's primarily, let's be clear with all this stuff, that's because I believe it is, right? You have to operate from the place that these are your real beliefs. You can alter your beliefs, you can change your beliefs, but you actually have to believe this stuff. And you know what the difference is when you're not believing something and when you are believing something. So a lot of this can have to do with like loosening or expanding your mind, where you can believe things maybe you didn't believe before. It's a good meta skill to have. Anyway, let's say you're imagining something, you're kind of keeping it at a distance, but you've accepted it. Don't pay attention to outside facts and sense evidence. Just try to suspend your disbelief for what I'm saying is maybe 3 days tops. 3 days tops. That's it. Just suspend your disbelief. It's like if you're watching a movie and it clearly makes no sense and that would never happen in reality. You're not going to be a fucking loser in the movie theater with your friends. That's impossible. That would not happen. Just suspend your fucking disbelief for 3 days and see what happens. If that then allows you to get into a state where things start, moving around, I think you might enjoy that a little bit. Okay. Everything exists already. This is a key point as well. Everything exists. There's an infinite things that could exist. They all exist always. What you're doing by kind of having them project onto the screen of external reality is you're tuning your awareness, your internal state, to its frequency, and then it materializes or manifests. That's basically how this works. So what we're doing here is kind of learning how to put different slides on the projector, move ourselves to places where we can actually see these things outside that we see inside, and recognizing the relationship there might not be one where we exercise 100% control of that and conscious awareness of it all of the time. There are other places in reality and dimensions where that's what's going on. Here, we seem to like the kind of oscillation between remembering that and forgetting it. Enjoy that process. It's not a bad thing. You certainly can level up your baseline. That happens. But enjoy the process, essentially, of, going back and forth. That makes this a lot more fun. If you don't, you're going to be like, why is it happening? It's not good. I thought I was doing it. It was good. That's not how it works. You'll have a lot more fun when you realize that. There's not a thing that you can imagine that already doesn't exist. It already is there, right? Eternity exists. When you imagine, you're basically just claiming yourself to exist and identifying with that, right? That's how you access those states. That's how you feel and imagine. That's you claiming it into this perception tunnel, which we call reality, right? Let's talk a little bit about the law. This is essentially what we're talking here. There's the law and the promise. Both come from Neville Goddard. This is not something that has to come from anyone. This is something that just is. We all have different narratives and ways of explaining it and ways it works for us. This is just one that I find to be particularly helpful in terms of elucidating what's going on here. Here's the law, basically, right? An assumption will harden into fact. If an assumption creates its own reality, then there's no such thing as fiction. Create the world you wish for by an imaginal act, right? Create the world you wish for by an imaginal act. That's basically it. Assumption has a negative connotation. Well, I'm assuming something about that person. I don't know, but I'm assuming. I'm not talking about assuming like a judgment you're passing on someone. It's assuming like, I am assuming the form of this. I am assuming my ultimate form. You're actually wearing it kind of like a wardrobe. This is, I'm assuming it. That will harden into fact. It's just, we experience external reality as so convincing, but really it's just an image. There really isn't a difference between what we experience out there and what we experience internally. I know there's like a qualitative felt difference. Like if I touch this table, it feels there. But imagine like the smell of a rose, right? Can you imagine a rose in your hand, put it up to your face, and so can you smell it? Is that real? Is that not real? What is that? How can you smell that? What is that? What is memory? What's the future? It's all one thing, right? You alter one aspect of that, it cascades in either direction, your awareness. I like this idea of be here now, right? We like Ram Dass, we like all these people. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize being here now also means our consciousness. That's always there. Where do you want to focus on it? There's nothing wrong going into the past, using the revision technique, changing some aspect of maybe you were the type of person who just didn't believe this shit is possible. Can you find a point where that crystallized as the belief and go, no, it's not that I believe it's 100% possible, but I'm not going to just cut that aspect of my being off from it. Can you change that in the past using the revision technique, feeling it sensorily with your imagination? If you can do that, it's likely that will cascade up to your present level, which makes it a little bit easier to actually do this stuff. I'm all about like meta skills, meta hacks, find the things that are applicable through a lot of different ways, use that for skills that basically serve you in perpetuity. It's like basically investing something that has pretty good returns. Another important thing here is to abandon yourself to your wish fulfilled. Surrender to your desire. If that brings up like a weird feeling in you, surrendering to your desire, then maybe you don't trust yourself fully. Maybe you haven't recognized that you're totally fine, you're totally good, there's nothing wrong with you, you're allowed to want what you're allowed to want. It doesn't make you a bad person. That's just something you believe about yourself if you find that coming up. So surrender to your desire. Desire gets knocked a shitload because of the way it's typically associated. And that has a lot to do with people suppressing their shadows, suppressing things that, they don't want to expose to other people or even themselves. And that wreaks havoc on society, people's lives, their minds. And that's where we get a lot of this dissonance out in the world. So there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that stuff. Actually, what creates the dissonance in your life and in your psychology and other people's stuff is suppressing that. So if you want something, surrender to it. It's not a big deal. What I mean by surrender is you're just allowing it. You're just accepting that this is something I want. More than that, it's something that I have. It's something I'm deserving. It's something I'm entitled to, right? Entitlement also negative connotation usually. Oh, that person's so entitled. They feel like they're entitled to everything. Okay. Can you feel like you're entitled? What aren't you entitled to? I guess if you didn't want to be entitled to having people hate you, you don't have to feel entitled to that. But for the most part, you can have whatever you want in life. If that rubs you the wrong way because it's not been your direct experience, again, suspend your disbelief for 3 days. What you love, you become. That's super important. Now, another weird thing is that what you hate, you also kind of become, because judgment or condemning someone creates that situation for you. Loving and admiring also creates for you. You can go either way with it. That's why sometimes when you're like really focused on something you don't want, you're bringing it into your life. There's a connective energy there. It's a love-hate thing, right? Faith plus love is basically the secret of imagining, prayer, whatever you want to call it. Faith is just believing what is unbelievable. That's all. There's no real objective proof that anything should happen in your life. There's nothing that actually means forces are conspiring to make it, but you believe that. You believe that impossible is possible. And then love is the action of identifying and kind of getting in resonance with that. If you can use those two things in tandem, I think a lot of people like ecstasy and other drugs that kind of get them into a heightened open state because they can start generating kind of the necessary love towards different things. Now, kind of the downfall, what I'd say with some chemical usages of like getting into that resonant state is you can ascribe it solely to the drug or the chemical. You can be like, oh, well, that only happens when I do that. I get like this when I do that. When I first started dabbling with MDMA way back when, like I quickly realized like I kind of normally feel like this most of the time. It was like a heightened state, but it wasn't like a completely different radical transformation in my kind of general outlook on life. For a lot of people, it is. For a lot of people, they're not walking around feeling like that, and so it has a very powerful kind of resonant impact on them. But for the most part, like that's just a state of consciousness. If you can identify with that, you absolutely don't need anything else to kind of generate that love. And then you apply that plus faith, love plus faith. That's just believing what's unbelievable. Apply that to things that you've identified as desires in your life. See what happens there. Again, sense impressions are just an image, right? There's no difference between that and a memory or an imagined future event. They're all equally real. There's not like that's less real than something else. It's not like something that happened in your life is less real than it was when it happened. You may change the memory of it. Of course, we're doing that all the time. That's actually a skill. That's not a bad thing. Occupy your states. Like go into the state of what you're trying to identify, right? Or identify with. So if that's, let's say, just a feeling of peace and tranquility, you can go there in your head. If you have to build a very elaborate scene that, implies that you're on a beach, you're with a loved one, whatever it is, by all means do that. Just get into the place where you feel like that's happening. When you close your eyes, you can be anywhere you want at any given time. Don't recommend doing this while you're driving or when you're hanging out with people, but you can do that. The problem is we usually make the misapprehension that because that's in our heads and there's this outside thing there, well, then that's less real. That's exactly opposite from how things actually work. If this sounds wrong, if it sounds incorrect, again, go back and just try it. Just try it. Again, suspend your disbelief. That's like the challenge this week, the group imagining thing. If we're doing those again, totally fucking stop doing those. 3 days. Suspend your disbelief about all this stuff. Just suspend it. Even if you're like super gung-ho and you totally believe it, just suspend your disbelief. See what's going on. What do you believe? What don't you believe? Try this shit out. Once a day, that's it. A lot of people, like I heard Earl Nightingale was telling you, write down all this stuff. I do believe in the power of writing things down. It imprints it into this reality. Of course, it's an imagined thing being made manifest. It actually has an impact. But you don't have to do that. Definitely don't have to do that. You just have to be intentional about it, maybe for like 5 minutes a day at night when you're going to sleep. It can't be easier. If someone like me can actually use this stuff effectively, you can do it too. Trust me on that. Right? Imagination, there's a term I heard that I liked for it. It's spiritual sensation. What does that mean? Sounds kind of stupid. Spiritual sensation is just going back to that example of a rose in your hand. You imagine a rose in your hand. You smell the rose. Can you smell it now? That's it. Doesn't mean anything more complicated than that. You're doing it internally, right? You're entering a state where it seems real. You can smell a rose. You can imagine eating your favorite food. Right? These are things that we naturally have the ability to do. If you can do that also, furthermore, just to point it out, you can be like, oh, okay, well, that's because I've smelled a rose before. That's because I've eaten that food before. That's not true. You can go in and imagine something you've never seen before. Literally, you've never experienced, you've never seen. Doesn't matter. You can go in and imagine that. Now, the difference is when you're doing that, if you accept that as equally real as this reality, you're inevitably putting yourself on a course where you get that, where you experience that. Your conviction and faith and perseverance related to that is actually kind of the mechanism that pulls it into your reality. It's not anything to do with time. That's why things can happen very quickly when you get this, because it really has nothing to do with time. Again, everything, what we perceive as time is more likely one constant event that is always taking place that we access through our consciousness, through our filter of consciousness. That's really more accurately what's going on. It's cool that we've developed this way to do that and not go totally insane. That's nice. But really, that's a more accurate description of what's going on. And not even just from like a metaphysical woo standpoint. Physics, modern physics, quantum physics continues to kind of home in on that point, that it's not really this fixed thing that we identify with. They've now found time flows backwards in certain instances. So if you can wrap your mind around that, you probably get a better sense of what's going on. Changing the past, let's talk about this, helps you imagine the future. Let's say you're having someone present day, difficult situation with your life. There's some thing going on. It's just a pain in the ass. You're getting your studio set up and the fucking shit won't work, right? There's just something that's going on. Go back to a point that may be related to that frustration or that kind of resistance or that pain or suffering or fear or whatever it is. Change that. Go there. Be like, you know what? Yeah, that happened. But I reacted differently. And it really didn't have a lasting impact on my personality or my habits or my relationship with this thing. Didn't at all. I feel pretty good about it, actually. That'll loosen up kind of the knot that is created psychologically that you have difficult dealing with now. There's so many things that we're aware of that we have difficulties with in the present moment. You know, we're just, I'm the type of person who has problems with this. This gives me issues, anger, sadness, abandonment, rage, whatever it is. Those things. If you go back to these moments where it was difficult in the past, you loosen yourself up now so you can actually start making progress on these things or actually transcending them or overcome them. That's really important because if you feel like you're bogged down, you may be too stuck in the present and the future, and that can create kind of a push-pull dynamic that's not super fun. But if you can go back and loosen something up, you might have a better chance of then focusing on those goals or desires that you're trying to achieve. And again, trying to achieve shouldn't be more than identifying what the feeling is and then assuming that. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's not It's not more complicated than that. We can make it more complicated. We could do a whole thing where we have to rub our third eye and fucking our nipples and get on the floor and spin around 10 times. We could totally do that, and it's going to work because ritualistic stuff does seem to work for a lot of people. But it's not more complicated than identifying a clear intention or desire and assuming that. That's it. It's the whole fucking process. There's a lot of cool things we can do with that. Gave the mirror technique again last week. That's one of my favorites. But for the most part, that's really all we're doing. And then just get comfortable with shit ebbing and flowing. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's so much more fun when you recognize like you're on a roller coaster. Sometimes the roller coaster goes down and it's exhilarating, and sometimes you go up and you have to be anticipating. Doesn't have to mean the down part of the roller coaster is bad or the up part is boring or terrifying. That's your relationship to it. The one thing you always have command of, right, is how you're going to react to anything. It may not feel like that. It may feel like an impulse. It may feel like something you can't get over and you can't achieve, but you can. You always have the ability to do that. If that doesn't feel accurate, go back and try to identify where you determine that that's not the type of person you are. Go back to that and be like, no, I'm totally the type of person who can do that. That's actually what I'm capable of doing. Okay. Oh, it's weird. I didn't know where that one came from. Cool. Good episode, guys. I'm going to keep talking. Sorry, I was like a phantom ghost sound. It sounded so loud in my headphones. Freaked the shit out of me. I was saying it was a good episode. I don't know where it came from. Thanks for listening. There's the Patreon. There's the Discord for CryptoSync. We're doing crypto stuff. It's fun. It's good. I don't know what else to say about that. It's also relatively easy. At this point in the cycle, it can get more difficult at other times. But right now, if you want to go and find out more about cryptocurrency and kind of the connection of the type of shit I talk about on this show, the Patreon's the best way. The lowest level, $7.77 level. You get access to the Discord. You can leave a month later. You don't have to keep paying. You can. We do other shit there. There's live streams. There's tarot stuff. There's music stuff. There's a lot of fun shit. But you can just sign up for that. You're in the community forever. And so you can learn. People ask, like, what do I do? Where do I get started? Literally just find a community. It doesn't have to be that one. Just find a group of people who seem like they have an idea of what they're talking about. And you can ask them questions and they'll answer them. That's basically all I can recommend. Twitter is a great place, but you have to sift through a lot of bullshit. It's like anything else. I love crypto Twitter. But just, it's like anything else in life. Find a community of reputable and trustworthy people who can help you out, who seem to be kind of generous with their time and attention. That's usually the best thing you can do. So CryptoSync is a place to do that. What else we going on? That's it. Hanging out, making music, having a good time. That's basically the gist of it. Till next week, happy imagining.
But we have a strange anxiety that if we don't interfere, it won't happen. Now that's the root of an enormous amount of trouble. Life is earnest, and I've got to go on. Then your life is a drag, and not a gain. Now, it's my contention, my personal opinion, this is my basic metaphysical axiom, let me put it that way, that existence, the physical universe, is basically fatal. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.